Hello, everybody. Welcome to Clash of the Correspondents, the third of four C.O.T.C podcasts during this international break. And today I'm joined by two of our correspondents ahead of a Sunday lunchtime kickoff in game week 30. Firstly, let me introduce you to Ali Mitchell at FPL_Gaffer, our Southampton correspondent. How are you, Ali?
Yes, all good. Thank you very much, James. All good. Thanks.
Good man. And also let me introduce you to Jack Toner at Turfy Topper, our Burnley correspondent. How are you, Jack?
Yeah, not so bad. Missing football during the break, but what can you do?
Well, you put in world-class performances like you did at Everton, mate. You've got every right to be missing a bit of football. The rest of us could do with the break, I think. And that might be the case for Ali's Southampton as well. 4 points since game week 17, that big win against Liverpool. Are you still in trouble, mate?
Yeah, that was a massive win. I mean, Liverpool are one of those teams over the last few seasons that I would have just loved to have beat. I think everyone knows a Liverpool fan that gives it the big one in the WhatsApp groups. And I was really pleased to win that one. But then everyone's been beating them at the moment, so it doesn't even feel that big anymore. But I don't feel like we're in trouble. I feel like we are safe. I feel like there are enough games for us to pick up 5 more points relatively easily, and then we've obviously got the cup to focus on, which is quite exciting. But I'm not worried about the league because also our fixtures aren't the worst. Like there are winnable games in there, and as a very last resort, there are drawable games in there. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling at the moment.
You've actually got probably the best next 3 fixtures in the league, I would argue, in Burnley, West Brom and Crystal Palace as a trio of fixtures. But should this run continue and you get to the other side of that before the FA Cup semi, although the Palace game is probably going to be afterwards now, and you've only picked up, say, 1 point or so, and Fulham have won twice in between, and then are suddenly only 2 points behind you, surely you're still in trouble, aren't you?
That is the worry. And I mean, with Fulham's form at the moment, they are playing quite well. It's I'm just hoping that, kind of Newcastle and Fulham can continue this sort of battle amongst themselves, and while they're fighting with each other, we can pick up a couple more points against those teams that you mentioned a minute ago. Because, like you said, if we're not picking up sort of 5 points out of the next 9 available, then yeah, we'll be in it deep.
I don't even think it's that many. I mean, look, you're on 33 points. You're 7 points clear of Fulham, and this applies to obviously Jack's Burnley as well. You're in the same position. You're 7 points clear of Fulham. They've played a game more, and obviously, importantly, you've both got a 5 point buffer over Newcastle as well. It's probably more concern of Fulham catching either of you than Newcastle, I would have thought. Is that how you feel, Jack, as well? Because you've pulled out of this situation, basically.
Yeah, I was a little bit more worried this season. Obviously, we had a really tough start and we sort of couldn't get going. And I remember, because I've got a really close friend who's a Newcastle fan, and he was saying how bad they were when they were doing well. So yeah, coming into it now, I'm looking at the Fulham fixture because that's like 4 games from the end. And I was always like, I didn't want to get to that fixture and us be having to pick up points. I didn't want it to be a must win. Obviously it's one that you don't want to lose, but if it was like everything riding on it. But I think, like you said, Newcastle have put that buffer in between us that you just think, well, we're not as shit as both Newcastle and Fulham, so it's just scrap between them two, really, I think.
Would you say you're safe, Jack?
Not yet, but I'm a little bit more confident than what I was. I think when you're in this position, you're never confident, but on paper, if I was more of a neutral, then I'd probably be saying, yeah, then we're fine.
What do you think, Ali, points-wise, it will take to stay up? You're both on 33 at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I say 38 would, I think, is what the target we want to get to. But I'm thinking this season, just with the way it's going, 35, 36 will probably be enough. You're looking at those teams that are struggling away. Brighton potentially have wins in them, but I think if we get to 36, I think that would be okay.
Is that how you feel about it, Jack?
I'd want a little bit more. I just think that Fulham look a decent side considering in the bottom 3. Like you said, Brighton look, people say that they're one of the most unlucky sides to be in the position they are with some of the football they've played. So, yeah, I'd like to get near a 4. Less would be enough this season. You never know.
All right. Give your computer a slap, Jack. You just disappeared on us a little bit.
Oh, did I? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good, mate. No problems at all. Ali, I want to talk in the first instance about your goalkeeper situation at Southampton. Have you got a preference for who's in goal? And from an FPL perspective, can either of us work out what's about to happen next?
I really like James McCarthy. I've never made that sort of
James McCarthy, what the Crystal Palace midfielder.
Really like him so much that I don't have a clue where he is. I really like McCarthy. I feel like he's kept us in the league in previous seasons, but I do think his time in the squad had come to the starting 11 had come to kind of its end, really, and I feel like Forster has earned his spot now, and if you're going to go for a keeper, he would be the one to go for, plainly because you're probably not going to start the Southampton goalkeeper in many fixtures with the way that we're playing at the moment. But because of his price, you would probably be bringing him in because he's a starting goalkeeper and he's the cheapest available. Unless there's only 3.9 options, he's the cheapest goalkeeper available at starting, so that's gold, really. If you wanted to push the boat out and you'll have a stat match, you could go for both and cover all angles, but I'm not sure many will be doing that.
No, I wouldn't recommend getting both. I said a few weeks ago that basically it was probably a no-brainer for those thinking of wildcarding in game week 31. I don't feel like that now, and I don't think I'll be getting him myself. I don't feel that it's worth the chance, because I'm probably going to want him to cover either a double, because we know you're probably going to have one later in the season whenever the Tottenham game is going to be rearranged. We now think that's going to be towards the end of the season, or at least maybe the midweek before the FA Cup final. Or alternatively, it could be that he covers a blank game week if that's how it decides to rearrange. So I don't want to get a player in there that's not going to play, basically. But you think he probably stays in goal now?
Well, I mean, we had, Alex McCarthy started against Manchester City. We lost 5-2. And then Forster came back in for Brighton. We lost 2-1. So I'm not sure. I just don't know what way that coin is going to flip at the moment. I think he's kind of at a bit of a loss. He's just hoping that one of them can kind of keep a clean sheet and make Ralph's mind up for him, really, rather than him having to have this headache every week of who's gonna ship in less goals. But there's real questions to be asked about the lads that are in front of either McCarthy or Forster as well, because it's not good enough. We're conceding too many shots, and then it's really difficult to pick which one's not just the best out of the two, but which one's the least rubbish out of the two at the moment to see us through to the end.
Why do you think that is, in terms of conceding more shots and not looking as strong defensively? Because I think we understood it a bit when Vestergaard got injured, but he's been back for a while now.
He's been back. I mean, we, like any club, have had our injuries. I don't think we've had it any worse than many other teams in the league. We've had our fair share. We've had a few youngsters that are starting, as have anyone else. But it kind of starts at the front. Danny Ings obviously was injured for quite a while, and he sort of leads the line in terms of that pressing. He really gets into the face of defenders and sets the precedent for the rest of the squad. It's definitely noticeable when he's missing, not just because we don't score as many goals, but also the style of play just doesn't seem to be that same exciting, in your face sort of defensive football. And and because of that, we're not winning the ball back very high, and we're inviting teams onto us a little bit more. I mean, I would much rather at this than when we lost to Spurs at the start of the year, and it just run out of answers. Well, we didn't even run out of answers. We had one answer, and it consistently let us down.
I don't think you knew that Tottenham were asking the same question to find the answers, mate, that day.
I know. But that was one where we started really strong and then just fell away, and our weakness got exposed, and we didn't really have that plan B. And that could be a little element of it now, where we're struggling to adapt to games as they turn. Like the Brighton match felt really slow. It just felt really quite sluggish, tiresome. But these are excuses that any team at the moment could give, really. So we're level on that in that respect.
We had you come on prior to double game week 25. You did a podcast just with myself, and we looked at your FPL assets. And I spoke to you then about concerns that I wasn't comfortable with Southampton playing 2-3 times a week because of the amount of intensity you want to put into games off the ball. And I think you're highlighting there saying it's not quite there at the moment. But we're basically now, over this next period, going back to once a week for a couple of weeks. Does that give you a bit more confidence to feel like, okay, week's worth of training, you've probably not had as many international players away as some other clubs might have done? Is that to your benefit coming up to before the weekend?
I hope so. I hope it gives us a chance just to, find ourselves again a little bit and get back into just a bit of form. I feel like we're in a position where we just need to get a draw, just a draw or a scrappy last minute winner against one of these teams that we're playing in the next 3, and then we can really kick on from there, because we have struggled without sort of Danny Ings in that initial pressing element. But just as a squad, we just need to settle, get the systems back in place that we've been so successful with in many matches over the last few seasons. Although we've not been fighting at the top of the league, we have played some exciting football, and we are one of those teams that we are spoken about for pressing high, wanting to play on the front foot, which we just need to get that back a little bit.
Would you take a draw on Sunday in this game with Burnley now if I offered it to you?
Yeah, I think so. My prediction would be that we would win this game, because it's a game that I feel like Southampton should be winning. But I would definitely take a draw, because I feel like with our current form, that's what we need. We just need to get a draw that maybe we didn't deserve, that we can then build on, because we beat Sheffield United, thankfully. I mean, if we didn't, I would be really worried right now. But we beat Sheffield United. But apart from that, like you say, it's been really poor since the Liverpool game, and just we haven't managed to find our feet at all in our games.
Jack, would you take a draw on Sunday?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not a must win. Obviously, we're both going to be a little bit uncomfortable until we've got to the magic number, which is enough to stay up. But I think with the games that both of us have got left, it's just a case of you don't really want to lose it, and hopefully we don't set up.
That's it.
Is there a danger with that, Jack? You're the 12 o'clock kickoff. Newcastle play at 2 o'clock. Fulham play at 4:30 p.m. Is there a danger the two sides, I'm not saying collude for a draw, but perhaps even just listening to the talk of you two, both sides would perhaps be okay with a low-scoring affair, don't get beat, i.e. if the game's tied with 20 minutes to go, okay, it's more important not to lose this game?
Yeah, I think so. I think the two games, well, 3 for me, that stick out for being the poorest this season is in the first 10 games we'd played West Brom and Brighton, and we was dog awful against both, because they were games where we'd not had the best run of form. We've approached it with the mantra of let's not get beat, and we've literally just sent it out. They were 2 boring draws, and the worry is that, like, we've just played against Arsenal. We got a good point against them. We was excellent against Everton, who was really good against Leicester. It wouldn't surprise me for us to set up against Southampton and just play a boring style of football and just grind out a horrible 0-0 or something. But I hope we don't. I hope we take the game on and try and push for all 3.
When you played against Tottenham, I said in my assessment afterwards that I knew after 2 minutes of the game that Tottenham would win. When I saw you coming and pressing and you made basically the same mistakes that I saw you make when you got beat at White Hart Lane the season before, in terms of the distances between the defence and the midfield were too big. Then you had the really positive result against Leicester, then the draw with Arsenal, I think.
Yeah.
Then the performance at Everton was absolutely brilliant. Is there a small evolution happening here at Burnley that people aren't aware of?
I think Dyche said it himself. Ideally, we'd have the players to do that week in, week out. He doesn't knock the players, but obviously, for teams like us, we know we've got a budget. We know we've got our limitations. I think against Everton that day, they highlighted on Match of the Day, Westwood and Brown on midfield was superb. You talk about those distances, the way they pressed, the way they got back, the way they kept the shape was just superb. Some weeks, like we can try and push from the front, and if it's not quite there, I mean, it didn't help against you that we conceded within the first 10 minutes, so you're always up against it. But I definitely think on our day, when we get our tactics right, we can play brilliantly. And I think that's what's so frustrating to be a Burnley fan, is you go on Twitter and you see all the comments, which is like, oh, here we go, same old Tin Pot Burnley Football Club. Whereas on our day, we can be great. But I think you're right in saying, we do need to do that more consistently. Dyche can mix up his style of play. We don't always just play long ball football. But I think sometimes, because he's got the players there that he knows can do both, in certain games will just result to playing the wrong style of football.
I think the majority of people were so impressed with the way you played at Everton. A lot of it was counter-attacking football as well, mate, and actually fast-paced, high energy. You've spoken about, I feel like what didn't work at Tottenham with the two midfield players really worked well at Everton. And I also feel something psychologically is so much better about you if Brady or Goodmanson are in the team, where you've got a player on either side that can deliver the ball. We've spoken in the past quite a bit about your imbalance on the left-hand side, where you might have to kind of force playing Brownhill on the right. I think in the past you've done that with players like Jeff Hendrick in seasons gone by and stuff. Is that a really big, important factor to Burnley being more offensive, is having either Brady or Goodmanson on the right?
No. On its day, it can make a difference, but I think sometimes it depends against the opposition. In certain games, the wingers won't be bombing forward. They won't be, doing that sort of work. I think the big change this season, especially on that right-hand side, has been Matt Lauten. He's been excellent. He's been back to his previous self probably like 2-3 years ago now. He sort of went missing when we had the Europa League season. We've talked about Charlie Taylor in the past, but he's not been as, obviously he's been in and out of team with injuries, but he's not quite delivered to his usual standards this season. So, but I think in general, the fullback play has been better. But you are right. We've just never had consistency on the right-hand side. 1 week it used to be, it was Hendrick, then it was Brady, then it's Goodmanson. Whereas McNeil, I think he had an injury for a couple of games this season, but prior to that, he'd started something like 82 games in a row or something like that. So we've had the consistency more on the left-hand side. But yeah, I'd love to see Goodmanson have a good run of 20, 25 games, but it just isn't going to happen.
So if I was wildcarding in game week 31, which I probably am, and I'm wildcarding straight into Burnley at home to Newcastle, if I want one defensively, it's Lowton, is it?
Yes, I would say so.
At 4.4.
Yeah, 4.4. Ben Mee's the highest scoring defender. I think he's on 86. Loughton's on...
It's only 4 points more than Lauten.
And there's like, what, a million price difference. He's chipped in with a goal. His positioning's been great going forward. Sometimes he's cutting inside, sometimes he's hitting the line. So especially now we've got, because in the past fixtures, we've been without Wood. We've missed that big aerial presence. So I definitely think that on the right-hand side, Lauten will be bombing forward, and he would be the one that you'd be looking for to chip in with the odd assist, maybe.
They're all laughing at the Burnley right back bombing forward, the thoughts of that. But I think I saw a stat that he's created the most chance of defenders over the last 4 or 5 game weeks or something, actually. So
yeah,
as much as everybody, the goal at Crystal Palace was obviously incredible. And there was a lot of kind of hindsight merchants reaction to that. Actually, his numbers are stacking up to suggest that, 4.4, he should be a really a strong consideration. And the other beauty with it, obviously, is at that price, you can pick and choose, obviously, if you find the right rotator, whether he plays or not. Although, as you'll always warn us, Jack, clean sheets come when you least expect them.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So Southampton and Newcastle, the next two, we probably concede less against Wolves and Man United in the two after that. You just never know.
Ali, I wanted to speak to you about Redmond, because last time we spoke, you were quite critical of him. I guess recency bias tells us he had a brilliant performance at Bournemouth in the FA Cup.
Yeah.
Have you reconsidered that assessment, or is he still just frustrating to you?
Yeah, he does. He does frustrate me, and I mean, I ran to the end of my tether with him because I've picked him up on so many podcasts, and then the last one, I just thought, no, do you know what? You're not having it anymore, Nathan. And I'm sure he is gutted. But at the end of the day, he needs to be doing that when it matters. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the performance against Bournemouth the other day. I feel like, we were by far worthy of that match, and we were the better team, head and shoulders above them. But he needs to do that in the league. He's not registered an attack and return since Chelsea in game week 25. That was an assist. He scored 1 goal all season. That was against Sheffield United in a 3-0 win. Well, we're looking for someone to win us games, to step up when it really matters, and he just isn't quite there yet. There's something a little bit different about scoring the winner versus scoring when you're already winning and dominating the match at the same time. I feel like we need a difference maker in the tight matches, and that's what we're looking for on our FPL assets. But in saying that, our next 3 fixtures are quite nice. So if you're going to bring him in, it would be after he's scored a brace, and when our fixtures are quite nice, right? So.
And to clarify, I think you mean after the Bournemouth brace, not after he's got a brace in FPL.
Yeah,
I mean, looking at his points throughout the season, he's basically returning at fractionally over 3 points per 90 minutes, basically, which doesn't, at 6.4 million, doesn't offer much encouragement. No. So, I mean, of the alternatives, Stuart Armstrong at 0.9 cheaper, would that take your fancy more?
He's the name that I'd probably be going for, but even James Ward-Prowse, who has significantly outscored the pair of them and is also cheaper than Redmond. I mean, the only thing that makes Redmond more expensive is the fact that he's an attacking-minded player. But, he, like you said, just over 3 points a game, whereas you've got Ward-Prowse, who's, I think, over 126 points.
Spot on 126
at the moment. So he'd be the one I'd go for. I would just stretch that a little bit further to get Ward-Prowse than I would Armstrong at the moment. If I had the choice.
To be honest, can't really argue that. I mean, Ward-Prowse is 0.4 more than Armstrong. He's got 40 more points than him this season. The other beauty with JWP is the consistency of knowing us. We spoke about this before the doubles. If you get him in, we were speaking about the prospect of you having 3 doubles in a row. We were saying basically across the 3 weeks, he should get you at least 12 points or so. And I think that kind of bear fruit, and the 11-pointer at Sheffield United nearly covered that by itself. And there was a 7-pointer even in the defeat at Manchester City because he took penalties in both, didn't he?
Yeah.
Danny Ings, we think, might be back for Sunday. Do you think Ward-Prowse keeps pens, or do they go back to Danny Ings?
I would like to say he probably keeps them. I don't know if Danny Ings will be back or not, but then Ralph has rushed him back previously. I would like to think that James Ward-Prowse would keep pens, and I think the one thing about owning Ward-Prowse is it's just a bit more exciting. Like if we get a corner or we get a free kick, there's that anticipation of points could be coming soon, which is what we quite like as FPL managers. Whereas I feel like if you're going for Redmond or Armstrong, you're waiting for us to be dominating a game before you can genuinely think they're gonna burst into the box and potentially pick up some points here. So I think Ward-Prowse keeps pens. And he's always a threat from corners and set pieces in and around that box. So, I mean, he was taking them for England right when he was starting. So, filled with confidence. He's not just a minute.
He's the best. He's the best free kick taker in the league. I would have thought, mate. I mean,
I think so.
That you have that inner feeling when he has a free kick on the edge of the box. Even though we speak about it all the time, he's going over the wall and you still can't stop it.
It's just every time exactly. If he couldn't throw it any better, I don't think. Genuinely don't think he could. And the fact that he's not missed a minute for us all season just shows that he's got that resilience in him. He's obviously very, very fit. He's got the England call up. He must be just buzzing at the moment. So I'm really excited to see what he can do over the next few weeks.
A word on Nathan Teller. I think he's 4.3. He was brilliant at Sheffield United. And then played out wide again afterwards. He played up through the middle at Bramall Lane. And I thought, that's a really interesting one as a fifth midfielder. Suddenly he's kind of appeared. And in the games since have put me off that.
Yeah, 4.3 mil is cheap. If you've got that fifth midfielder slot, bring him in. I wouldn't bring him in because you want a Southampton midfielder. No, I'd be bringing in James Ward-Prowse. But if you've got a fifth midfielder, and you're looking for a budget option to fill it, he's the one. Like you say, he looked attacking. He got the assist against Sheffield United, but since then, not really done much. But he's young, exciting, exactly what we need in terms of someone that is willing to attack games, and he's bought into the style of play. So from that respect, I think, bring him in if you need that spot, but don't be relying on him to start, in your team.
Okay. Jack, we must speak about what we always speak about, because we did mention Brady and Goodmanson potentially off the right. We just stick Dwight McNeil on the right, like me and you always suggest.
I don't know why it doesn't happen more. I just don't get it. I mean, I know, especially when we'd spent quite a lot of this season without having Chris Wood up there. You think you don't always want to just be the team that runs down the wing and puts the cross in and expects Wood to get on the end of it. And I've seen it many times across many Burnley managers across the years that you'd quite often see, like 30th minute, you'd see the call and you'd see the wingers just swap from side to side. I don't see the danger in him doing that more often. Even if he says, I prefer McNeil on the left, if he's being stubborn and says, you know what, for half an hour, we're just going to give him a swap and let him cut inside, but it just doesn't happen.
I know when McNeil scored that goal of Everton, the first thing I thought of was you, and the first thing you thought of was me.
Yeah.
Brilliant. What a goal that was, mate. And I think that's the annoyance. He can't score that goal from the left.
No. And we've talked about his attacking returns, and they've never quite been consistent enough to warrant him from an FPL point of view. Cracking player, and he's got a wand of a left foot on him, but it's just sometimes quite often with Chris Wood scores majority of his goals with his head, but quite often the ball will go in, it'll come back out, and there's always like Westwood on the edge of the box. So if it doesn't go in the first time, we always chance of getting the second ball in there. But yeah, he for me should start more on the right.
The Burnley asset that's interesting me most, Jack, is Vydra. 4.8 million up front. I see him ideal potentially for a third striker spot, to rotate between perhaps a 3-4-3, 3-5-2 for the running. Do you reckon that he'll stay in the team? I know he's only had like the last 5 starts in a row, but I feel like that partnership with Wood, it's got something in there. They've got a little bit of difference between them. I think they like playing with each other, is the feeling that I'm beginning to get. Do you think he'll stay in the team?
I think so. We've had a real chopping and changing of forwards this season. It's been a weird sort of 12 months with what happened with COVID, because we had both Wood and Barnes out. No, sorry, Wood and... Yeah, it was. It was Rodriguez and Vydra for the back end of last season. And they'd struck up a real good partnership, and people were calling for us to start with those two at the start of the season, but it never happened. Vydra's been very, very unfortunate. So for the listeners that have never really, looked into his career, obviously he signed for us. I think one of his first starts was against Cardiff. He bagged and then got dropped, and then never sort of found his way back into the team. So he's been very, very unlucky. The general feeling with his agent was that his contract was due to expire at the end of this season, and he was just going to go on a free. And we've triggered it, and apparently his agent was put on Twitter, and he was a bit annoyed because he wanted to get him a new club. And like you said, last 5 games, started all 5, and he's been a big part of how we play. It's really offered you the big man, little man sort of thing. We can play into pockets. He's coming deep to pick up the ball. He just gives us another option. But yeah, I think he keeps his place. I think which surprises me, because Dyche really likes Rodriguez, and obviously when Barnes is fit, he's always an option. The only worry is that obviously Vydra is usually subbed off, so you potentially losing that one point. But in terms of him, yeah, he's probably the most exciting striker we've got. So,
the last 5 games, he's played 90, 72, 90, 85, 77, goal and assist in his last 3, which includes obviously the goal against Leicester and assist against Everton. So it's 14 points over his last 3. I think 4.8 million forward, he's really interesting. Less than 1% owned. I've had a few people say, 1 week punt for game week 30, and I wonder if he's worth a shout.
Yeah, I mean, you look at our fixtures. So we've got Southampton, Newcastle, Fulham, and Sheffield United all still to play before the end of the season. So I don't see why not. If you've got that spot, and like you said, you want to go for a differential, potentially climb some numbers, then yeah, I think he's definitely worth a shout.
I think it's also important as well. And look at the perhaps the games that you didn't mention there, Jack. You've obviously got United and Wolves away 32-33. But the other three you haven't mentioned, West Ham, Leeds, Liverpool, they're all at home as well.
Yeah.
I feel like Vydra's possibly, it seems daft to say it this season, is possibly a player that might have a bias towards home returns. It's just something I've got in me. He says, remembering that he scored away to Southampton last season as well. So I wouldn't be put off too much by the fiction. Like I said, you could make a week-to-week call, couldn't you?
Yeah, we like many teams have been a bit unpredictable where some of the results have come from. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how we do shape up on Sunday. That'd give me a bit of an idea of whether you'd want to include him against some of these other teams, because if we don't pick up the points against the teams like Southampton, no disrespect, you'd then be thinking, are we going to go make a game of teams like Wolves and Man United? Would he be more on the offensive for stuff like that? So it's hard to tell, but yeah, for his price, I've got absolutely no worries about bringing in Vydra for 4.8.
My only concern with it buying him at that price would be if he comes out the team, it might be difficult to get away if I've spent all the money.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I think, like, for me, if I look at him versus, say, Iheanacho, I think it's about $1 million more at the moment. You'd have to say Iheanacho is probably worth the extra, but I'm thinking of maybe having the two possibly with Kane as a trio up front, perhaps. Or should I only be considering Che Adams? Back in form, isn't he?
Yeah, and signed for Scotland. So
is it McAdams now, is it?
And as he said in his interview, it's definitely not because of the Euros whatsoever, but he must be he must be buzzing to get going there. And he seems to have just got his place in the team. He's scoring some goals. He looks good, right? He looks like what we hoped he would be. Scored in his last three. What more could you want from a forward, really? So
confidence player, isn't he? Is how it's beginning to feel with him.
That's it, and I think he started to feel that pressure when he wasn't scoring when he first signed for us. But I think with Ings showing, he isn't bulletproof. He does pick up his injuries. He's got his chance to sort of lead the line, and it looks like finally. It has taken him some time, but fair play to Ralph as well, for keeping that faith in him, because he only scored 4 goals in the first half of the season, which you maybe couldn't have blamed Ralph for dropping him, but he's bagged in his last 3. So hopefully this is the sign of some great things to come in a Saints shirt for him.
It's interesting, Jack. Towards the start of the podcast, Ali mentioned about beating Liverpool and it being a big deal, and then everybody else did it. It didn't seem to matter. Everybody else has won at Anfield since you were the first to win there. You did a podcast with us with Dan, FPL Loco Lord, before that game, previewing the double game week you both had. And as soon as we finished, Jack went, James, you didn't mention the takeover. And we did, and I couldn't, that was one of the things that I was like, yeah, we're going to talk about the takeover as well. Didn't even mention it once. We did a Patreon podcast about it afterwards. But since then, I get the feeling not all's well from Burnley fans' perspective. Can you just talk about that briefly, Jack?
Yeah, so there was something came out about the way they've bought the club. So it's basically like a leverage takeover. So the rumour is that they've only staked something like £50 million to buy a £300 million club, which, if you're a betting man, it's not much of a risk for what you can achieve. So my worry just is that if for whatever reason 1 year Burnley don't have enough to stay up and we go down, as soon as you're taken out of that big money pit, which is the Premier League, and the cash just isn't there the same, it's just not going to work out, I don't think. So there's just always that worrying. But a lot of Burnley fans was getting excited and they thought, this is the way forward, this is the next step. And I'm like, what is the next step? And I'm like, without doing us an injustice, we got into Europe. What more could you really want? I don't think we're ever going to do a Leicester. Turf Moor is only just about full. You could make it twice the size, but it still only have 22,000 people in there. We're not going to become a global market and start selling shirts to Americans or halfway across the world. It's just not going to happen. I think there was no danger for me in just admitting we are what we are and doing what we did well. Whereas now, I just think it's another roll of the dice and it just could be another thing that goes wrong. But again, I hope I'm wrong. If all goes well and we stay in the Premier League, then the loan will be repaid and everything will be hunky dory. But it's just the what ifs.
I guess we'll find out in the summer if you stay up, which I think all of us think you will, and it goes for you as well, Ali. I think we'll find out in the summer, Jay, where you're at. We'll know at the end of the transfer window if Burnley was seen as. I think the fear is from the outside looking at it and going, have they bought Burnley as an investment, because that's what they do, isn't it?
Yeah, which is
their resources they invest.
My worry is they reckon that it's going to cost us something like £12 million a year in interest for the repayments just for the club. Okay. Well, in the past 2 years, we've not spent 12 million anyway, so that's money we've got to find on top of that. So Dyche deserves to be backed, and to be fair to him, he's quite down to earth. He's not going to go and want to spend 30-40 million pounds on players. He'd be happy with us giving Tarkowski a new deal and signing a decent winger and probably another midfielder or a defender. He wouldn't want much, but we do need to spend and freshen it up, because Sané's like Dale Stephens. We've just given Phil Bardsley another year. He's bloody 36. So at what point are we going to start saying, yes, we've got Dwight McNeil in there, but if you take Dwight McNeil out, the average age of that squad is a lot higher than probably what it looks with Dwight McNeil in there. So, yeah, hopefully we do a bit of something in the summer, but I wouldn't expect fireworks again.
If Dyche walked away, do you think the average manager would keep your squad of players up?
Potentially. I think for a season it'll be all right. I think we've probably got enough of a good, core of players. Your Popes, your Tarkowskis, your Ben Mee, Chris Woods, Dwight McNeil. The core of those players would be in most of the bottom half of the Premier League's team. But the worry is that if certain heads get turned, or like you just look at Bruce at Newcastle, as soon as someone's face doesn't fit, then you start to ask questions more. And that's been the thing for us with Dyche, is there's been times when he's not got it right, but he just doesn't get questions. Whereas Bruce makes one mistake and the whole of Newcastle fans are all over his back. Start of this season, we'd like 2 points from the first 7 games or something like that. Not a single question asked. Like you wouldn't even think about sacking him, which works obviously in his favour, but obviously not a lot of other managers get that respect.
I think yours is getting it as well, isn't it, Ali? There's no question over him. Just briefly, is there Hassenhuttl?
No, I don't think so. I think he's in a very similar position. I think, like your Bruces and your Allardyces, they've unfortunately for themselves built up this reputation of being the manager that just goes in to keep a club up. And when the second the club signs a manager like that, their backs kind of get up because the intentions maybe don't match that of the fans. Whereas for Jack and I, our managers have a style of play that they're quite passionate about, a group of players that is playing for them, and we're playing Premier League football, like the best league in the world. It's great to be a fan of one of these clubs, I think, at the moment. Whereas I think if I was a Newcastle fan with Bruce as my manager, I would probably be a little bit worried because of his reputation of, his aspirations don't maybe match that of the size of a club of of Newcastle. So that would be my worry if I was a fan of under a manager like that. And we've had them in the past. We've had our fair share of managers that have just been brought in to keep us up.
Marquez.
Yeah, exactly. Back-to-back relegation, I think, and then he was the right man to come in. I don't get that. But no questions over Ralph at the moment, I don't think.
Cool. The good news about the bad form is probably no one wants to take him at the moment either. That's the bonus.
2 9-0s, mate, doesn't exactly scream my application's going on top of that pile,
We had an offline chat on Sunday, me and Ali, and we was talking about, obviously, Southampton are in the FA Cup semi-final. Knew they were going to play Leicester or Manchester United. It didn't matter which one they was going to play. One of them beat them 9-0. You must be looking forward to the semi, though. Do you give yourself any chance of winning the cup?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the best semi-final draw we could have had. So I'm excited. I'm hoping we're safe in the league. I hope we can pick up 6 more points, 5 as a bare minimum, and focus on the cup and bring a bit of excitement to it.
I wish you the very best of luck, mate, because there's 3 teams in there. I think everybody knows are stronger. So listen, in this country, we love an underdog, mate, so we wish you good luck. It's weird to have an underdog against Leicester, but yeah, it would be the full circle, wouldn't it, if you beat Leicester in that semi-final? I think, that would turn everything again.
Yeah.
Brilliant, guys. Really, really appreciated that. Before you go, let's have predictions for Sunday then. Ali, you're the home team. Go first, my friend.
I think it might be the first time I've predicted this not to win. I'm gonna go for 0-0.
Jack.
I'm gonna go more interested with a 1-1 draw. Just can't see past it. I just think, like you're saying with the cup, I think you'll come out early and you'll probably want to get the job done, thinking you can then rest off a bit. But I can't see us losing, but can't see it winning.
I'm the second.
No, it goes 0.5, plays 0.5, and just kind of sit in the middle. I'm going to lean for 0-0 as well, and I think it's because at the end of the day, when it's over, I think if it's a draw, both teams will look back on it and go, okay, that's another point towards safety, and that's the main thing at the moment. I think you both know you've got easier fixtures still to come as well, possibly for both of you in the immediate following fixture as well. You've got a good 2 coming up, Jack. Ali's got a good 3 coming up. So I think there could be points for the 2 of you coming up. I'll go 0-0. Oh, that's gonna listen. That'd be good for me because that's before Tottenham, right? So that'll put me right in the mood if I watch that beforehand. Thanks very much, guys. You can follow Ali at FPL_Gaffer, and you can follow Jack at Turfy Topper, both on Twitter. Still to come this week, we've got Sky Fantasy Football tomorrow with Andrew Ferguson for Fantasy Football Hub. Arsenal versus Liverpool on Thursday, C.O.T.C with 352 and FPL Loco Lord. Thanks very much again to Ali and Jack. Cue music, please, man child.